Assalamualaikum everyone. I welcome you all to the sixth Education Grand Round organized by TD. And today the title of the EGR is Workplace-Based Assessments, Application and Challenges, which will be given by Dr. Mohammed Rizwan Khan. He's an associate professor and currently he's working as a director of GI Surgery Fellowship Program and Consultant General in Hepatobiliary Surgery. He has done FCPS, FRCS from Glasgow, Edinburgh, UK, FACS from USA, and recently he has completed his MHPE from AKU, Pakistan. Better than UK. Okay, Dr. Rizwan Khan.
Thank you very much, Dr. Amber, and thank you, DED, for organizing this activity. I mean, all of you know that I'm a surgeon. The longest part was about the surgery, and then some part was about the MHP from AKU. So my interest was in work-based assessment. This was probably started when it started as a program director in general surgery, and then during my MHPE, there was a good enough exposure for me to understand the processes, how does work-based assessment work, and how is it really helpful for the trainees and students. So I'm just going to share some of my thoughts on this subject. I don't think this talk is going to be really comprehensive, covering all the aspects, but I will try and cover the most important and the most relevant issues on this subject. You will probably realize that during my talk that my surgical background may take over certain areas, but that is what I am essentially. I'll try and keep it to minimum, but things really won't change much, especially when you reach enough. Just try. So let's just start. So I'll just try and cover some of these aspects of workplace-based assessment. What is it actually? What is its primary purpose? What are various different methods being used around the world? How do they help? And the bigger question, do they really help? How do we apply these methods in practice? And what are the challenges to their application? As I said before, these are some of the relevant questions that came to my mind when I started thinking about this workplace-based assessment. And I thought that I'll try and answer some of these questions. I may not refer back to this slide again and again, but these are the questions I'm trying to answer in the next maybe few slides. As an educationist or as a teacher or as a faculty member, assessment is an integral part of whatever you do. Personally speaking, I don't think it's a very nice job to do because you are judging people all the time. But I think it's required. It's required from all of us. We have to assess people either to for whatever purpose we have. So what is actually assessment? Is the process of gathering information. And why do you want to do that? Because you want to understand what students know, what do they understand, and what can they do from their own understanding. So this is essential, the whole purpose of assessment education. And why do we do that? As I said before, I think there are two main purposes. First is our own assessment, I would say. Are we teaching what we think we are teaching? We might think that we are great teachers, we are probably the best in the world, but are we really imparting that knowledge to our students? Are our students learning what they are supposed to learn? Is there a way to teach better? Is there a different way of teaching? Is there a different way of enhancing learning? So these are all bigger questions that we ask to ourselves at different stages in our career or maybe just one course. And this Assessment is called basically assessment for learning. You want to improve the learning of the students. The other major purpose of assessment is the outcome part. Uh, every teaching process has a reason for it. You want your students to reach somewhere, and then you want to make sure they reach where you want them to reach. And this is a high-stake decision that you have to make for each course, for each year, for each assessment that you do. And this may be a pass or fail or promotion decision, whatever you want to call this. And this is basically assessment of learning. They have learned what they were supposed to learn to a certain degree with a certain endpoint. That's the second main idea of assessment. So, we know that there are many different ways of assessing how people learn, what people learn, and there are different ways of assessing different domains. There are different ways of assessing cognitive domains, their psychomotor skills, and their affective areas. And I'm not going to go into this detail because I assume all of us are there already. But I want you to maybe spend a few seconds on this slide because this is the slide which probably makes the basis of this presentation of this talk. Whatever course we have, for example, MBBS graduate program or a postgraduate program or whatever we call this, the student generally starts as a novice, a person who doesn't know much, but then they pass through this process of few months, years, or whatever, depending on the time frame they have. And ultimately, the goal is to have an expert in their specific field. This can be an MBBS program, this can be a surgical residency program, pediatric emergency, whatever you call this. You want to have people who are adequately trained to perform that skilled job. That's the whole idea of any training program or education program that you have. So if you look at the process of going through this, it has certain steps as described by Miller. So once we teach, we don't really go from novice to expert. The students have to pass through different phases. And these phases are assessed by different means. The first step probably is to have certain amount of knowledge. So there are different ways we can assess knowledge. Some of them are listed here. Then the next stage is the application of their knowledge, whatever they have got. And there are different ways of means of assessing the second part, which is known as how. And then the third part is that they can actually, based on that knowledge, perform certain skills or apply that knowledge in real situation. That's the third part. And then they establish ways of how to assess them. But the last part is very important. The last part is the application of all that knowledge, skills, maybe the attitude into real practice, which is the whole performance of an individual in that given setup. The bigger question is, do we really assess people with that context? So we assess them in bits and pieces, but do we really assess the person as a whole? And that is where the application of workplace-based assessment comes in. Just to give you certain examples, some of the questions that you can ask. Do we really observe the maybe students or trainees when they're actually practicing in real life or real patients? For example, how many times do we observe a student while they're actually taking history or performing a physical exam? For example, I have a clinic, the student will go to the room, talk to the patient, come back with a certain data set and then verbalize that data set. Do I actually see that? How do they deal with the patient? How do they ask questions? How do they frame those questions? What is their attitude? How do they communicate? How do they actually do the physical examination part? I'm interested in findings, but do I actually go through the process of getting these findings out of the patient? I think this is the bigger question that we need to ask ourselves. So do we know how do they communicate? What about empathy? And then more high-stake processes, interventions. Passing an NG tube, passing catheter, suturing, performing actual surgical procedure. Do we really observe our trainees in a way that once we certify them, they can perform a certain procedure? Does the American College of Surgeons have that standard, that yardstick? Does CPSP actually observe trainees perform a procedure and then give them a license to kill, or whatever you call it, practice? So a person, if somebody has done FCPS, they are certified surgeons, But do we really know they can perform an open cholecystectomy, a laparoscopic cholecystectomy, appendectomy, a laparotomy, blah, 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 whatever you call this, or certain procedures in medicine, or pediatric medicine, whatever they are. So this is where the workplace-based assessment comes in. So now we know that the first three parts are sort of standardized. Everybody knows what to do about them. But it's the last bit, which is the does part, when they're actually doing in real life, which is not really standardized. And that is where the application of this process comes in. So just a summary, what is workplace-based assessment? It's assessment of trainees' performance during the clinical settings, that is real life. It is a method of simultaneously assessing the clinical skills, procedure skills of the trainees, and then giving them feedback about their performance. This is using real patients, real life situations, and judgment of actual practitioners, the skilled practitioners who are doing this job day in and day out. That is basically the crux of workplace-based assessment. So you make a judgment on students' performance and then give them feedback. If I make a summary, this is what it is. I'll go into a bit of more detail because I want everybody to have a fair idea of this. Now, when you talk about different methods, actually, when you start reading about it, this is just a very small representation. There are many different methods being used which are quoted as workplace-based assessment, and they use the same principle which I just described. So they observe the students or trainees perform in the real life, then they have a certain discussion, then they have a feedback, and then this process goes on and on. There are different names. I really don't want to go into those details because this is too much for this half-an-hour session. I'm just going to talk about the first two because I have first-hand encounter with these two methods. So what about Mini CEX? Mini CEX was essentially established in the United States, and this is used by American Board of Internal Medicine. What do you do in Mini CEX? The residents and faculty plan the timing of observation ahead of time. A single faculty member observes the trainee or the resident interact with the patient, perform a physical examination in a different variety of clinical setting. This could be a clinic, this could be an outpatient, this could be inpatient, this could be anywhere. One resident and one assessor. The resident takes a history, performs examination, and then the faculty observes and scores the performance using a structured document. This is not just random act. So everything is planned ahead of time. And then there's a process which I think is the most important part of this process, which is a process of understanding each other, which is a process of giving feedback. This has to be constructive feedback with a plan to improve for the future. The resident and faculty agree on this assessment, sign the document, and that is one observation which is stored for the record. This is what it is, essentially, for the Mini CEX. What about, and just to give you some idea of what a document looks like, I'm sorry for this small print, but you can look at the patient, what's the diagnosis, what is the complexity of the cases, what is the clinical setting, what is the patient status, outpatient, initial follow-up, whatever. And there are many different domains or areas which can be assessed, from history taking to physical examination to communication skills, explanation, counseling, clinical judgment, and then all of them or some of them may be given a score on this scale, which is 1 to 9. And another important part is the part of feedback, where you assess what was especially good about this performance, or what is something that needs improvement. I think this part is probably the most important in this one. Then coming on to the direct observational procedural skills, this was developed in UK. Similar pattern, similar plan, adapted by the Royal College Initiative Physicians. Setting performance observations similar to Mini CEX, except that for the history and physical examination part, this is replaced by a technical procedure. Rest of it is more or less similar. This is observed by the faculty, and then there's a process of feedback. What procedures can you choose? The list is just one of the lists that we used many years ago. This can be really exhaustive depending on your specialty. This is mainly for general surgery. I'm not going to go into detail, but it can really range from prep and rep to actual procedures depending on what level of the resident you are assessing. The form is again similar. You can look at the complexity of the procedure, what clinical setting you have, and then again many different domains that you can observe one given procedure. This could be demonstration of anatomy, analgesia, informed consent, technical ability, and so many other areas, or communication with the patient. So in just one setting, you can assess some very different areas of training. This, and then again, you give a feedback, what was good, what was not so good, and how to go further. So this is assessment when the resident or trainees are actually performing, doing their real life work. No special preparation. It's actual performance. Sorry about that. It is assumed that there may be less anxiety for the trainee or the students. It's assumed. I'm not really sure about that because if somebody is assessing me, I would be tense. Can assess many aspects in one setting, as I said. It's reproducible. Many encounters in one go or different settings, many different people can assess at different occasions, so it can be done repeatedly. And also assessment of procedure skills, which is really the important thing in many areas during surgery. I think the most important part is here. So whenever there is a trainee and the trainee is always being observed or being watched, it may be difficult for a trainee to know what is the difference, what is the gap between his current learning, his or her current learning, and the intended learning. Although we assume that the trainees know where they're going, but they may not actually know where is the problem, how to rectify that problem. And that is where this part comes in. If you tell them, for example, just saying, you are not doing well, telling a person you're not doing well, it's probably not good enough. You need to really tell them what is not good enough, where is the problem, how to rectify it. Not all of it probably, but some guidelines to give them some idea of what is going on, what is the issue here, why I'm not doing well. I need to understand that part. And I think that is where the strength of this method is. You observe them actually doing what they are supposed to do, you identify their problems, and then give them a feedback. This is where the problem is. You can work on this, rest of it is all fine. So probably that is the main strength of this assessment. So the trainee has to actually start the process, read the case and time, and use many different things, including patient safety, and has to communicate with the faculty so that they can make a plan together for the improvement of the performance. Similarly, the assessor has to understand the purpose of this exercise, work with the trainee or the student, and then come out with a plan for improvement of performance, enhancement of performance, and this has to be documented so that the next encounter is probably better than the previous one. So, although it sounds simple, it may not really be simple. Because when I do it, or I probably the way I plan it, maybe I would say, so my Monday morning training, first patient will have this encounter, training right aside. But this first patient may be a very simple patient with a right upper quadrant pain who has gallstones. Or this can be a really complex patient, maybe some advanced oncological issue where this trainee may not be adequately trained to take an assessment, but the person still needs to go through the process of history taking, maybe doing a physical examination. So I think the patient scenarios can vary in complexity. Similarly, the skills or competency that the assessor is assessing may be variable, they may be different. Although I say this is less stress, but you always have somebody observing you, and this may actually have some effect on the performance of the training. So there are many different areas that can still be addressed on that form. You have the leeway to control these issues because you can mention what was the complexity of the procedure or the patient. So now coming back again to the various types of workplace case assessment. There are many different types and they are being used mostly in the developed world. I listed some of the methods being used in different countries. North America, Canada, UK, Australia, New Zealand. And then I asked myself, where are we? Where do we stand? I think we probably have a long way to go here, the way I look at this. I read one of very good papers from Dar es Salaam, Brunei Dar es Salaam. They have used these methods and with good outcomes for their own setup. But it's probably a small country with a national level situation where they can control many things. Maybe we can also, I don't know, maybe Dr. Zuberi can help. Okay. So, is it really effective coming to this part? When we start looking at this part of the literature, there is a huge body of data which looks at perception, 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 perception of participants, perception of faculty, perception of institution, blah, 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 blah. And it's so strongly positive that actually you can be lost in this data and you would say, ah, that's it. See, overwhelming supportive perception for this. Why? There are many reasons, because people have participation, the trainees have participation in their own assessment, faculty is involved, you are assessing what you are meant to assess rather than just looking at one part of it. So that is why people feel that this is a very positive exercise, generally speaking. But I realize that educationists are generally difficult. They don't really want to look at the perception only. They want to have a look at the evidence. It's just really a positive exercise that is helping people. It's just the perception which is positive. So whenever you try and assess any tool, there are many different criteria that you have to go through, and some of them are listed here. I would just argue that it's unlikely that one assessment type will cover all the areas. So I would think that you need to have more than one type of assessment to assess different areas. But let's just talk about this one part, which is work-based assessment. And I'll talk about the mini CX because I don't want to get into details of many. Now, so reliability. Reliability is basically reproducibility. And people thought that because perception was very positive, when do you get a reliable result? So you could go from below upward. So people initially thought that maybe higher number, 12, 14 encounters. Then people thought that maybe 8 encounters or 10 encounters for reliable assessment are good enough. And then recently I studied people where they thought that maybe 6 assessment or even less than 6 assessment are good enough. So as you get more experience, as you get to know the procedure more, probably less number of assessments may be adequate to give the same result, which were initially thought to be that you need many more encounters to get a reproducible reliable result. And there are different ways of means by which you can enhance reliability. There is need for training of student assessors. You can use a different range of settings, assessors, you can use more than one methods. And as I said before, there is a need to triangulate different assessing methods to get the same result. And that makes the results more reproducible. The second important part is validity. Validity, I think, is the key assessment of any assessment tool. And there are many different types of validity. I just used a couple of examples to tell you that how does it correlate with maybe other methods to give you some idea of its validity. So in one of the study which I just listed here, Academic Medicine 2002, many CX performance correlated well with the written in-training exam and routine faculty rating. So they used 2 parameters to assess the performance with mini CX, and they thought there was a very good correlation between all the 3 methods. Similarly, in one of the high-stakes exams from the Royal College of Physician Surgeons, Canada, they thought that the clinical assessment using mini CX was probably as good as using other methods of clinical competence for the exam. So there's good data that this is a reasonably reliable and valid tool for assessment of performance of the trainees. And this, by the way, there's also data for undergraduate students, which are not really included in this data. Similar data where it has been used for undergraduate students for similar results. So validity can also be enhanced by different methods: integration with curriculum, clear identification of competency and goals, and increasing complexity as the people progress through the program, which means you really plan what you want to assess. Okay? But whenever you do whatever you do, there are always challenges, which make things difficult, but they still need to be addressed. And I think that is where the struggle is at this point. So what are the challenges? I think I would think that the most important barrier to implementation of work-based assessment is probably the mindset here. And that mindset has to change from the faculty and then to the students. Because the assumption is that all the faculty members, whoever they are trained to do whatever type of education or assessment in a given situation. That's probably not true. I would think for if you introduce something new, people, faculty, students, present all need to be trained to go through that process. And that is where the problem is. So if I have a resident who's with me for the 3 months and then I assess this person, generally what I do, I just shy off of getting him low grades. So this is failure to fail. Because this person is working with me for 3 months and I could say, हाँ ठीक है मसला है लेकिन कोई बात नहीं, that's fine, grades are fine, let's just work hard. That's the problem involved. And then you just check boxes. If you look at if you remember the mini CX and docs form, you check boxes. For example, if you check a box of 5, that is still satisfactory, which is between 4 and 6. What does that really mean? So what is the description of 5 here? That's the problem number 2. Then the other important issue is that although I would do this, go through this activity and I would do the checkbox part, I may not give adequate feedback, which is the most important part in this exercise. Because of whatever reason, reasons are generally these specific group. Visit services, too many patients in the clinics, many other commitments, difficult to find plenty time for this exercise. So there have been issues in the application part. Then the residents, although this is workplace-based assessment, this is still an assessment. This is perceived as an examination. They are stressed, they may not perform as well as they would otherwise do in real life. So what do you need? You need training and commitment by the faculty and the residents or trainees or students, whatever you want to use them. If both of them have commitment, protecting time, they know what to do, how to do, only then this is going to be successful. And of course, there's the role of governing bodies here, educational programs, by assessing bodies. Different people need to come together and work on this. Otherwise, individuals will find it difficult to apply in a given situation. Another important area, which is a confusion in the literature, is what is the real purpose of workplace-based assessment? And I would refer this to my initial couple of slides. Why do we assess people? Is it formative? Is it summative? Is it really a driving lesson or a driving test when you're doing this exercise? And this is again, there's a lot of confusion whenever you review literature about workplace-based assessment on this subject. What is the real purpose of this? Is it formative? As I said time and again, it is the feedback which is the most important. So feedback is essentially formative. But there are then situations where it's being used for summative purposes. So how do you go about it? That's the bigger question, I think, in all the application part. I found this paper quite interesting. They say good questions, good answers. So if your construct aligns with your purpose, your assessment is always going to be good. Which means, whenever you do an assessment, for example, a workplace-based assessment, there's a purpose. The purpose is, can I trust this trainee or resident to perform a certain procedure? That's the question that you need to answer. And this independence, which means the ability to perform independently, will vary different depending on the context, depending on the situation you are in. I think the whole purpose of workplace-based assessment is whether you can trust a trainee to perform a procedure or not. And the different terms used for this, for example, milestones, for example, competencies, for example, whatever you want to use. So different terms being used, but that is the whole idea. They should be doing what they are supposed to do independently with reasonable safety. That's the whole idea, basically. Okay. There is suggestion that because workplace-based assessment, for example, mini CEX is one term for a procedure, there can be two different terms for depending on the purpose you are using it for. If this is for formative purposes, you can say this is just a supervised learning event. It can be done more frequently. You choose topic, timing, and you give feedback. You may not score. But if it is being used for summative assessment, it has to be on certain guidelines. You can use a different term if this is being used for a different purpose. This is just a suggestion. The other suggestion is that these rating scales may be structured. It should mean something rather than just giving a number. And that will make this exercise more useful. So a score of 4 should mean something, and a score of 6, which means something different. That's the other suggestion for this purpose, for this exercise. So the question, can the same assessment be used for different purposes? The answer is probably yes. It can be used, but the purpose has to be agreed and documented. If feedback is documented, it can be just a formative assessment, but if it's a rating which is important, then it has to be used as a summative assessment. So maybe in summary, I think my feeling is that workplace-based assessment is a very good way of assessing and giving feedback to people, to the trainees, to the students. It has many strengths. It's real life, it is feasible, it is reasonably reliable. There are many studies to assess the validity. The most important part, as I said again, you tell the trainees where the problem is rather than you're not good enough. And give them a plan. How do they improve? How do they work? That is the most important part of this type of assessment. You can use different competences depending on whatever method you use. And I did a small study maybe 3 years ago, and I looked at this perception of the trainee and faculty after implementation of many CX and talks in our system. And I think there was a lot of positive feedback from especially the junior trainees, because they are the people who have least encountered with the faculty. There was a lot of positive feedback. But then it needs really commitment, maybe some regulations, I would say, not just commitment alone. Challenges are you need to train people, there has to be a commitment by the training faculty, there has to be some integration. What are you assessing? Why are you assessing? It has to go with the curriculum, with the competencies. There has to be some triangulation with other methods of assessment. This probably independent assessment method is not good enough. And as I said time and again, there is a role of governing bodies in application of these methods. They're important because, as we all know, assessment drives learning. If they know what we are looking for, they will do what is being done. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rizwan, for such a wonderful presentation. Now it's the time for question answer and with the panelists. We have 3 faculty members in our panel discussion. Dr. Khadija Humayun. I would like you to Dr. Khadija, she's an associate professor and she's working as a pediatric endocrinologist. She has been the UG and residency director and now is the director of education for pediatrics. She tried to introduce workplace-based assessment. Our second panelist is Dr. Jacqueline Dias. Dr. Dias is an associate professor and is also working in the capacity of director, post-RN, BSCN, and blended learning Sonam. And our third panelist, Dr. Mohammed Tariq. Sir.
The most recent professor.
Yes. Dr. Tariq is a professor. He is also holding 2 administrative positions. He is a section head of internal medicine and interim associate dean. He tried to introduce multi-source feedback and has also published. So now it's the time for question answer. Chair, and I need a mic as well. And this is one. So it's time for.
One with the panelists.
Gigi will.
Sir. Most important thing here actually which I'm seeing we are missing, and Dr. Zwan and everybody can answer it better, because again you put a lot of hard work actually which we have seen just now. Is the milestone versus the destination. Whatever we are doing, so much of hard work is for which actually stops at a training point where people exit. What really happens after that? On which people are working like what is post Yale. People think that we just go to the Yale University and that's the last. That's a mirage. We have touched the apex. So with this type of all these efforts which we'll be doing, inshallah, and that really makes sense whatever you said. How can we make sure that exam will stay, exit exam will stay only as a milestone and not the destination. Because I think the problem which is the patients are encountering, if we are patient centered and being clinicians, if we are really thinking about our patients, then the main issue lies after the exit exam, not before. So I'm really grateful if you can guide us further. Thank you.
I think the issue is at the current situation. I think the issue is at both the stages. Not the. I think we have problem pre-exam, and we also have problem post-exam. The way I look at it. For example, we have a residency program in general surgery. For that matter, any training program that we have, as I said before. So I have residents who have done their CPS in year 4 and year 5, and I know for sure they find it difficult to do a lap cholecystectomy. They may struggle sometimes with an appendectomy, but they are, as a principal, as a license they are actually the surgeon, they are the general surgeons who are licensed to do the general surgery in their clinical practice. It's just by the design of our program that they are with us even after they have done their FCPS or whatever it is. I think problem is at both the situations. We need to make sure that once the resident training graduates, they have adequate capacity to work as a specialist or whatever their idea is. Then the next stage probably is also important, which is progressive learning over the years, and probably that's a different stage in life. We need to have identified milestones, identified competencies before actually people graduate from our programs. That's what I'm looking at with this situation. As is used this example of FCPS, which is a licensing exam. So a person may not be able to perform a certain amount of procedure, but the person has the license. It's a surgeon. And I think that is where the catch is. We need to align both of them together. Person should be FCPS or whatever their qualification is, but should also be able to perform a certain amount of procedure or whatever their field is.
I think I also agree with Rizwan that a lot of time residents clear their FCPS, but in practice they need some more. So I think these sort of workplace-based assessment give them better chance early in their training, so that they have real encounters with real patients, so that when they are senior residents or they are becoming new faculty, they should be able to perform.
What I feel is, in answer to Dr. Nadim's question, there may be a need to evolve a better accrediting system for the practitioner. Once the exit exam has gone through, and once you are practicing our own specialty, then we need to have some mechanism, either in the university or in the city, or मतलब मिराज तो फिर उसके बगैर नहीं आएगी. You have to do the जहद मुसलसल. You can't reach there unless you are being observed for that. So एक बार resident को workplace based assessment से हमने निकाल दिया, but then as a faculty or as a practitioner, that something needs to be there. Continuous medical education, uska koi tarika कार हो. Without that, you may not reach them.
Can I add my bit?
Yes.
I think what's more important is that you have to look at where you're coming from. And I think that has to look at the curriculum as well. So what is your curriculum? Is it a competency-based curriculum? Are you going to just do one tick mark, or are you going to have a series of competencies? So say this is at the novice level, then the person is an advanced practitioner, and then the person becomes an expert. So I think you have to look at where you are in your curriculum and how you structured your curriculum if you want it. Using mini CX, using all of these workplace, it goes back to your curriculum. And I think that is the integral ingredient to carry out a workplace assessment.
Can I try and answer this question? This is something people struggle with and have actually come up with some solutions, not 100%. And one of them is that there has to be a time period, deadline when the residency finishes. You cannot have it go on forever. So what is it that the student or the learner must have attained at the tail end, at the end of 5 years? And it has been 100% agreed on that you have to separate the procedures. You can talk of appendectomy or you can talk of infallibility, minutiae or very high expertise level exams. The resident graduating at the surgery program must be able to be competent in appendectomy, but may struggle with the other. That may be acceptable because it depends on the outcome that you have designated. That may be the competent level that you will graduate a hepatobiliary surgeon. उसके लिए वो normal होगा. So having come back to that, maybe what you need to be is very sure that depending on even for those procedures, they have to have a great, they must be able to do. We can only graduate them at the competent level. Thank you, Jackie. When we graduate our residents and advanced learner in the required procedures, then we have a problem. That means we haven't done the training. And then that brings us back to Pal's issue and we haven't done the training because we haven't observed them enough or haven't given them feedback enough. I think the whole process of this talk, because we all know we cannot graduate an expert. You can only graduate them out at the competent level. It takes 10,000 hours of that procedure, 5 years of further training to make a competent specialist into an expert. Does that answer your question?
Close.
Close.
Dr. Shams from Dow. Just two parts to my question, or rather one comment, one question, Rizwan. When you talk about faculty training, would you consider on-job training during a session? Would you do that? And the second thing, which when you do say about 8 to 12 encounters, I know usually the practice we do is we take our own resident who's working with us at that moment, and we take them to the mini CX. But it has been shown from papers that if you bring in an entire new faculty member who has never worked with that resident, or take it into an emergency situation, an emergent case, the reliability actually falls drastically. So how do you deal with that?
So the training part I said was not, what I meant was that whenever you start a new process, for example, a BDCX or a talks in a certain environment, the people need to understand what is this all about. So general assumption is that as faculty we know everything, which is not the case, we don't understand. So whenever you start something new, you need to tell people what is expected of outcome of this process, what are the actual steps to go through before you make a conclusion about whatever it is, maybe CX talks or whatever it is. So I think, so some of this would be before you start, some of them would be maybe in the initial phase when they're actually going through this process. They would learn by doing it repeatedly, both the faculty and residents. Coming to the second part, which means who does this assessment, I think there's not a real answer to this question. There is an answer to the number of observations that you have. It could be you doing it repeatedly, but generally the assumption is that it could be many different people doing it in different situations, and that will give you different results, and then you use them as a sort of summative assessment if you want to use that as a summative assessment. So I don't think it is one person doing it repeatedly. It has to be different people, different settings, depending on what you want to. So that's what my thinking is about on this subject.
Thank you very much, Rizwan, for the presentation. I think it was much needed. I want to refer to a comment that you made earlier on, which was a very valid comment, that CPSP takes exit examinations. But how is CPSP going to be sure that the candidates who pass the exam are also competent in the procedures or skills that they are supposed to have? And I think that is one of the main reasons why CPSP is now promoting workplace-based assessment and requesting the institutions to start practicing it. And the experience that you all have had with respect to implementing, because Khadija has also implemented workplace-based assessment, a certain type, and you have also implemented. And Dr. Tariq has also, and probably Jackie also in nursing. So what is important to know is what are the facilitatory factors and what are the factors that sort of are hurdles in implementation of workplace assessment in a very, very busy environment, let's say AKU. And were you able to continue with this, and are you still doing it? We would really have liked, I would really have liked to learn about your experiences of implementing workplace-based assessment, and if you could shed some light on it, all of you. That would be great. Thank you.
Well, I think एक बात ये है कि we tried, we couldn't continue. And hurdles क्या थे? The buy-in of faculty has to be there, and the continuity of the process. It's if you are thinking like that, somebody who takes over from you need to continue that process. If you don't have that sort of a buy-in, then the process cannot continue. So, uske background mein, if I say that the program directors or the coordinators or educational, if all of them have a little bit of an educational background, know the basics of education beyond the introductory short course, that really helps. Then they know that how important it is. Getting something started is difficult, but to me, carrying it on in a long-term basis is much more difficult, because then you don't have that buy-in, and once you are not in a let's say administrative or a post where you can continue that, then things start fizzling out. That to me was my biggest problem, because as I had said, I think in one more occasion before this, यहाँ stage पे आके ये मान लेना कि हाँ हमने कोशिश की और नाकाम हुए, उसके लिए भी हिम्मत चाहिए. So हाँ हमने ये किया. But to me, I think initially I had all the support of my department. But once I was out of that particular position, I couldn't continue that.
The question would then be, should these, at some stage, are these changes in responsibility facilitatory or intervention? That's also a question. I mean, it's a continuation of the same.
Dr. Zuberi, the changes in the responsibilities should be facilitatory, but the culture. If somebody is in a particular position, the thought process is that one needs to move on. Somebody who's taking over needs to realize that what are the expectations from that post. The change should be there, one needs to move on, but if one has to stay in a particular job or thing, then there should be some sort of recognition.
You may not stay on, but there needs to be a passing of the baton.
Yeah.
You can't go and then everything finishes.
That needs to be done.
Because there's several.
Maybe I can say something. ये सबसे मुश्किल सवाल है जो आपने पूछा है.
इसका जवाब दिया
जी मैं बताता हूँ आपको. मेरे ख्याल से इशू ये है कि let's talk about APU further. इशू ये है कि seeing a patient is my responsibility here. If I'm late for the clinic for half an hour, somebody would call me. आप किधर हैं डॉक्टर साहब? 5 मिनट register हो गए. आप किधर clinic नहीं आए. All of us? Clinicians?
Yes.
सही है. But the same thing doesn't happen for education. Why not? why is there no accountability about education? That's the bigger question that we need to answer. So we assume as a faculty, हाँ पढ़ाना सबकी जिम्मेदारी है, लेकिन वो किधर है? So मरीज देखना मेरी जिम्मेदारी है. If I change the time of my clinic today for this, because if I would not change, तो मुझे इस 1 घंटे में 10 फोन आएंगे डॉक्टर साहब, क्या हो रहा है? Why is the same thing not happening for the education? I think that is where the it's not the director. Director क्या मर्जी है उसके साथ क्या करे उसके साथ? It is the people. It's all of us together in this. Why not? Unless this accountability comes to all of us, that this is also our responsibility. This is not going to happen. And I think the main issue is with the faculty commitment, at least in our sector. That's what I see. If this does not happen, it's not. हम सब बैठ के बातें कर सकते हैं, बड़ी-बड़ी तकरीरें कर सकते हैं, इससे बड़ी gathering कर सकते हैं. We need to bring this commitment back. We need to bring this responsibility back. We need to bring this accountability back to all of us. And this is a role for the university, the bodies, the UGME, the PGME, whatever you call it. If they don't play their role, there has to be some accountability for all of us. अगर मेरी जिम्मेदारी है तो पढ़ाना भी मेरी जिम्मेदारी है. जब तक ये नहीं होगा, this is not going to change. हाँ ये अखलाकियात, morality कर लें अच्छा है, ना कर लें तो भी अच्छा है. It's not going to work out. And that's where the problem is.
Demands accountability.
Yeah, I mean the
Yes.
society's ethics, not just the individual ethics.
Your experience, Dr. Islam, how many surgeons are involved with you in this?
Assalamualaikum. Is it going on?
Yeah.
Assalamualaikum, I'm Dr. Rekha Zaman. I'm not from AKU, of course. And thank you very much. Wonderful presentation, indeed a great discussion. And I am sorry I'm spoiling this good philosophical discussion that's going on. I would still, I have sort of a worry. There's almost no doubt about the usefulness of this approach in postgraduate training teaching. I'm wondering if it's feasible. I'm not saying it's not the right thing to do. Is it really feasible at undergraduate level? Because I'm coming from undergraduate teaching institute. And our problem is we don't, first of all, get them for enough time to be able to comment on our students, for one. And then with the workload of postgraduate trainees already, is it really feasible for the same thing to be done for that large number of undergraduates who come to us on each occasion?
Come January 2018, we will be starting this work-based learning for our undergraduate nursing students. And when we've said that, we've actually marked it out well. The planning has been going on for years. The important thing is that when you have to work with, you've got to have a support network behind you. So whether it be at the hospital, and I'm talking again of nurses, we have to have nurses who are preceptors. So that is very important, because if they're going to, manage it in the workplace and there's no faculty, then somebody else is. So you actually have to work on a model, a student preceptor and faculty model. So if you can work on a trio model, we've tried this out in many courses and it has worked successfully. This actually, using this model has enabled our students to return. We've got a number of our students who came from Syria. And when the conflict started in Syria in 2010, at that time they didn't know it was going to escalate into a war, we were able to let our students go back and complete their clinical hours and their clinical practice in their hometown because they wanted to be with their families. And we were only able to do because we had the workplace and learning model in place. So because we were able to do that, we did that. Another success story that we have in nursing is we worked with the program for nurse practitioners with the cardiothoracic surgeons here. And because none of us were actually trained as cardiothoracic nurses, we worked very closely with the residents and the 6 cardiothoracic surgeons here. And we were able to get that program moving. It's another story why it's not moving now, and that's not the forum. Yeah, you can have a good laugh, but there were reasons, and I mean there were things that the teacher said. But when the program was running and we all had put our oomph in it, it was successful. So yes, my question to you, Dr. Saab, is it can be worked, but provided you have a supportive clinical network of people to assist on the clinical area. Thank you.
If the large number of students in a class outside the AKU, we also have 100 students in our class, but compared to the government setups, 450 and so on, this will be done in the clinical setting. where the whole class doesn't go. It's a small group which goes to a particular ward, and there, being a student of one of those government colleges, I know that we spend, say, a month there, and I think the time is good enough to have an exposure to this workplace-based assessment. There will be a batch of 8 or 10 students going into that particular ward, and I think that is very well doable if the buy-in is there.
Can I continue with that? Can I just continue with one more sentence? Thank you, Khadija. Actually, the issue over there is not to add on, but to take up the student presentations and build this onto it. नई चीज मत add करें. You already, there is no way you can get students to go through without observing them. Residents, we think they know it all and they're busy helping us. They are much more neglected. So you have to add on. But for students, they're there. They have to do case presentations. You have to have what we, in the olden days at least, and now also before bedside, you ask them to do it in front of you and give them feedback and put it on this chart. This chart is nothing but standardized feedback. I am dead against, thank you Rizwan, when you were talking about the numbers, I feel that the numerical has done a big disservice. The real issue over here is to put the narrative, okay, what does 3 mean? वो बताने, yes, you were good, ये भी करना, ये भी करना, ये भी करना. It doesn't matter. If it doesn't have a number attached, the residents and students will accept it much more readily. The numerical was only to place it in future, if you want. So don't start new. जो आप कर रहे हैं आजकल, उसी को लेके. Just one, it just means 1 student per month. Everybody in that batch has to do a case, right? उसी में आप feedback देंगे.
We are not doing this really, and there are plans, the things that we are doing that. The new thing that we are trying to introduce.
No, I'm not saying don't add. What I'm saying is don't add new. Just take the old and change it. You have students who come to do clinicals, batches of 6 to 8. I'm also from a government college. They sit around in the bench, they see the patient, they present it, or they may go separately. During that time, ask the patient, ask the student to examine or take the instrument interview. Again, even if they've done it. Why? Because the beauty of this case is that it has to be on the residents' initiative. They can be prepared as much as they like. Us pe aap feedback दें.
Bushra, would you like to ask?
I was asking, actually, I'm more interested in your, what you have done, how many surgeons were involved and how many, for how many years it continued. What were the challenges in doing this workplace-based assessment in surgery? And how well it was taken up by the residents and the surgeons. That's what I want.
I think the way we started was not really bad. We had some workshops, we had some involvement of all the faculty members in our section that includes general surgery, breast, plastics, some vascular people, and everybody was involved from the word go. We had some workshops with the difficult questioner, Dr. Kosser. She came to our department a couple of times. So the start was not bad. The residents were involved in this process. I think that initially we thought that the numbers of times is going to be done would be very high because our purpose was essentially formative. Maybe once a week was the initial plan, but I think the number was probably too high in the beginning. So we started, but we did not go for long. Then it's still done in our general surgery, but it's not rigorously. We don't really follow the numbers. Some of the people do it, some of them really don't do it. I think the essential point where I probably became a bit emotional in my last comment was we need to have an understanding, we as a faculty, why it needs to be done. We need to have that commitment. Unless faculty has that commitment, it's not going to work. That's the basic key in all this situation. If the faculty feels that it's important, it needs to be done, this will be successful. If the faculty feels this is not, yeah, it's okay. You may do it, you may not do it, then it's not going to work out. And how is it going to be important for faculty? One is I feel passionately about it. The other is that I need to have some regulation. Somebody needs to call me after my exam day. Similarly for this mini CF, it needs to be done this week, this month, or whatever. So unless you give a similar importance from within and from outside, it's not really going to run smoothly. So I think both factors are important.
Any further? I think. Thank you so much all for attending this educational grand round. Thank you, our panelists, for the wonderful discussion. Thank you all.